I'm not scared. I can talk for 30 minutes about my life and things I'm passionate about in a way that's interesting and entertaining, broadly speaking. That's good lighting too, also. Probably should keep it like that. Hi, what's up? I'm gonna do like more audio journaling. I made a thing. It was bigger than I intended for it to be. I don't like my hair. I got like a thing, one of these guys, like a hair clip. I'm just gonna like, perfect. Yeah, so I like was working on a thing. You know what? I'm just gonna like synopsize like the full like year of my life and a highlight reel, like just the things that are of interest. I started working at a tea shop for a while. That was super fun. It was a lot of like, you know, people come in to get tea. And they're in like a pretty good mood because it's like a cute, fun store and it's a fun thing to be doing. Oftentimes parties are like 20 like older women with like fascinators on, which are like, I learned that fascinators are the sorts of hats that have like feathers on them and like swoop-a-doos and whatnot. And like, you know, they're just like loving the aesthetic of this place because it's all like very like Lewis Carroll, like Alice in Wonderland. It was a fun time, and like frequently they'll ask you to take a photo of them, and it's like, of course I would love to take a photo of you. Like it would be my privilege to document you as like a group of like 20 60 something year old women at this tea party, and then what you do for that is you squat like as low as you physically can, and then you just start like pelting them nonstop with synonyms of like beautiful, and like 100% of the time, like these ladies will eat it up. I'm not just as I guess a general disclaimer, I don't think this methodically about most of my social interactions, but like since I was working in the service industry as a bona fide tea-boy, it was like, you know, I felt like it was warranted. So that was great. I had super cool coworkers. I don't know why. I guess I worked the job because I thought it would be cute and fun. I don't have a particular strong affinity for tea. I don't even really like tea all that much, but I figured maybe it would grow on me while working there. It didn't. I was really just like walking past the store, and I saw the sign, and I said, maybe. And then I went inside and I said, could I? And they were like, maybe. Come in for an interview. And then I did that and didn't prep at all for any questions. They hit me with, tell me about yourself. And I had nothing. I was like I've worked in the service industry before. I've worked in multiple restaurants, and instead of saying that, I was like, I come from a loving family. And like the interview like grinded to a halt, and she was like, well, I guess like let's get in the kitchen. So that was super fun. Loved the tea shop job. All sorts of like young adult hijinks came about as a result of it. You know, like just incredibly volatile emotions at like breakneck speeds, which is like exactly what I'm hoping for. You know, like I want that. I want that volatility in my life, absolutely. At least for like, you know, another like 5 years or something. Don't hold me to that universe. Spider-Verse 2 came out. That's a highlight for me. I liked that movie a lot. I had a good time. I got my tonsils taken out. That was super eventful. I think at some point I mentioned that I like had mono, and I was like complaining about that. Never gonna happen again, baby. Well, I guess it never would have happened again, regardless of whether I had my tonsils taken out. It's like a one-time thing, I'm pretty sure. Chickenpox. But not getting tonsillitis ever again. I also had like my deviated septum like bonked to the side, which means I no longer snore. Downside though, I could do this thing where I would like push air through my sinuses in such a way that like it would make like a deep like guttural sound, and I used to like I would say that it sounded like a tiger growl, or just like a big cat sound, and I tried doing it to impress a girl, and no sound came out, and I was so embarrassed. So you know, no longer snore. I won't develop sleep apnea, but on the flip side, I lost like my one party trick, which is like a real devastating blow. Yeah, so those are like, what else? I guess I play music with like some of my friends pretty regularly. That's cool. I'll bring it up to like people that I meet or friends, you know, as fast as possible, because like the sooner that you mention to people that you barely know that you're in a band, like the better, right? No, that's not true. Also, you doing that is pretty immediately undermined by any further follow-up questions, because if they're like, oh, like, do you have like demos somewhere, like what are you performing, and you're like you know, you don't get any points for it after that. What else? I'm moving out of this house pretty soon, I hope. I'm pretty sure. Landlords are always kind of like suspicious and fishy, but I'm pretty confident that it's going to happen. And I'll be moving in with two close friends of mine, both of which were like super crucial in like some of my previous projects. So I feel really happy about that. It's like my living situation, like as is pretty great. But I feel like I need to really, I think it is just like I need to live with these two guys at some point, and like if not now, when. They're both like super creative and inspiring, and I'm hoping that like if we just like all exist in the same space for a while, we'll all become geniuses together. Maybe not, but you know, fingers crossed. And then big thing that more or less led to the creation of this like thing that you're watching right now. Well, kind of. It probably would have existed in some form regardless, but I made this thing sort of as a means of implementing stuff that I stuff that I learned while I was working my first job. I got a job very briefly. Yeah. It was like a 6-month long apprenticeship on a show that I really loved, working as a design apprentice. I'm not gonna like, I don't really know if there's like protocol for talking about it, so I'm not gonna say anything like super specific. I'm gonna speak in vaguities. Vaguities? I'm gonna speak in very loosely about it, just because like whatever, who cares? It's not important. Like whatever I learned is mostly what is important. But yeah, I had a really good time for like 6 months, making like character turnarounds and like prop design and doing special poses. I did not realize how important special poses were. Good to know. Yeah, so I made these two characters kind of trying to implement whatever I had learned and like synthesize a couple concepts that I thought were of note. And you know, like I proud of the characters, proud of the work. It did not need to be this long. I didn't need to go I want to say I didn't need to go this hard, but that implies that I like really knocked it out of the park, whereas I think really what I did is I just fixated on a pretty standard concept and tried to polish it as much as I could, which I so frequently do. But you know, whatever. Yeah, I got like so much air to fill that like even if I ramble completely aimlessly, like I'm sure I'll say more or less everything that I put into these characters from like an analytical perspective. Is that what I mean to say? basically there's no way that I can't eventually disclose what was in my head while I was making these characters. I think something I was trying to do with these characters, like a very large thing that I was trying to do with these characters really, was make something iconic and also make it very, very simple. I wanted to, make characters that are like obviously meant to be animated, in that there are very few shapes and the shapes are pretty simple, and there aren't that many lines or accessories, but the lines that are there are very specific and they are chosen with a purpose, if that makes much sense. I think that something that was hammered home pretty frequently while I was working was that there are ways to include details into character designs that aren't you adding details, it's adding specificity. So rather than there being like additional components added onto a character to give them further distinction from any other characters in the cast or from characters from any other property, you can just be more specific with what you have already given yourself and sort of elevate the character design to like, something that is like very polished and then at a certain point almost like sacred, which I know sounds crazy, but I have very strong opinions about cartoons and I'm like weirdly comfortable using the word sacred when it comes to describing characters, especially like definitely especially if the character is like a core component of a series and if they're like gonna be drawn hundreds of thousands of times and I think that you got like monastic freaking, you got monks spending the same amount of time transcribing Bible verses. Like why whatever, I'm not gonna look to Catholicism to validate my opinions. What do you think I am? My father? That's so fucked up. I can't run with that. Yeah, okay. So I also was thinking about designing two characters with one another. I have done like, it was like a year ago, but I did like 4 of these, and I just designed characters as like standalone entities, and I thought it would be fun to design characters that sort of like locked together, and they felt like they belonged to one another and complemented one another, but then at the same time were both incredibly, unique and felt like they were their own thing. Going for iconic character designs. It's easy, guys. It's so easy. So like right off the bat, like something that was super easy and apparent, and I think that is probably apparent to people that like look at them, is the treatment of like curves and angles with the two of them. So the pink guy, I don't have names for either of them. They're loosely based off of like the appearance of me and a friend of mine. Man, I have so much to say. My brain is like going in 1,000 different directions, but to tackle this thing really quickly, the guy, anytime that he has a line, the ability for that line to bend is going to be really, really great, and it's very unlikely that he'll ever bend to the point where his lines make a corner, if that makes any sense. So imagine his lines are made of like very fine like rubber, like it's rubber hose. I could just say it's like a rubber hose design where there's almost never corners, whereas her design is brittle in that if a line bends more than like however many I guess that would be like, so like that's 180 degrees, this is like 160 degrees. If her lines bend more than like 120 degrees, it's definitely a corner. Like there are very few rounded components in her design, which I think is fun. I think it's cool. There's also like some pretty basic stuff. Like I like the idea that he has a bunch of stuff that is very like close fitting and like form fitting, so you feel volume in all his shapes based off of the lines following the contours of his body. And he feels like, you know, there's a sort of tension in his clothes that makes it so that his shapes are kind of like tight, if that makes any sense, whereas her clothes are very baggy and free-flowing, and they fall down on her design, whereas pretty much all of his elements come up on his design. I don't love that I'm like holding my hands where I am for this description, but whatever. Yeah, and with her design, that's also complemented then by her hair like falling down and being an opportunity for, you know, secondary motion or overlapping motion, whereas his hair is his hair is up. Which just, you know, it makes him feel like he's just like, every part of him is like pushing upwards, where her design is very much like bottom heavy, pulled down to the ground. And that's also then elevated by very heavy, blocky shoes, and the only use of a gradiency between both of their designs being the very bottom of her pant leg, which I thought, a lot of these things I'm like describing and verbalizing now for the first time, and I hadn't thought about them. But that is like definitely something that I think I had considered, and I was like, I want to really improve that sense of directionality with her, making it so that it like almost as if like, you know, she's been like walking through the rain or something, and like her pants are heavy at the bottom, her pants and boots. Another thing I wanted to do with both of them is I wanted to give them super iconic eyes. I wanted them both to have eyes that you don't necessarily see on any other, or definitely not many other cartoon characters, animated characters. I think that I feel like I did an all right job. I don't want to say I succeeded, because I'm not the one who gets to judge that, but I feel relatively proud of it. I love his eyes. I'm a little bit less stoked about her eyes. Starting with him, I like to think that his eyes are like a malleable kind of like chromatic surface. Like they're hyper reflective pools of malleable jelly, and they can kind of like slide across his face. I'll pull up like the character design sheet or whatever, because I think that, you know, like the eyes have a resting state that I think feels nice and feels like it's full of emotion and like vulnerability, which I think is fun for the character. But they're also very like versatile, and they can be bent in ways that I think are interesting, and like reshaped for whatever emotion he needs to express. And then when he is expressing it, it's very effective, in my opinion. I'm obviously biased, but I like his eyes a lot. I showed them to some guy and he was like, I showed them to a friend, and he was like, it kind of looks like he's always crying. And initially I was like, I didn't mean for that to be the case. That's kind of a bummer. But then I thought about it a bit more, and I was like, that's actually kind of great. Actually, you know what? The thing you gave me as a note, and probably meant in like a critical manner, meant to be taken in a critical whatever. Like, I think that it's good. I think that it's interesting, because like crying is just like the strongest emotion, and it can be something that happens with pretty much any emotion in a certain quantity, right? So the idea that his emotions come off as like really powerful because it looks like he's always crying, I think is kind of cool. Hopefully it doesn't like confuse his design, but whatever. I'm standing by it because I think they're fun, and I haven't seen eyes drawn like this ever before. Yeah. Oh, you know what? This is really interesting. Okay, this is some real-time live reaction, something I'm just now noticing. With her eyes, I was very conscious of the fact that one of the very few instances of her design having a curve was in her eyes, and I thought that was interesting because I liked the idea that the eyes being like, you know, across the board, generally speaking, a focal point on a character's design. I thought it would be cool to have her eyes contrast the rest of her design by having a very large round shape in them, like her pupils. And her pupils take up like so much space. Her pupils by default are really, really large. And I thought that was a cool way to be like, oh, there's like depth in this character and in this design. Eyes are the window to the soul, yada yada. And now that I'm looking at his design, I'm realizing that it kind of looks like if he's always crying, it looks like there's that directionality to his face and to his expressions. Like his eyes are like sliding down his face. I don't know. I don't know that like comes through, but I like I forgot that there was a thing in there. I like the idea that is like baked in, I guess. But I definitely can't pretend that I meant to do that intentionally. I did with her design. I meant to make her eyes have that contrast, but I didn't with his, and it's just in there, and whatever. I'll pretend it was intentional with this video being the only evidence to the contrary. I think I spoke a fair bit about her eyes. I just like the idea that her eyes are like basically like they cover her entire face, and like they can be used to emote whatever she is feeling, almost as if they were like computer monitors. I also like how specific those shapes are. I feel like those kind of like a pair of two rhombuses is kind of like a fun way to draw very like confident eyes. On the topic of this character being like vaguely based off of my, if not necessarily like based off of my appearance, I think that I draw a lot of characters that look like me, and I think that that's weirdly kind of the case with everyone. I think that when people draw, somehow they look like what they draw, and it's like almost always the case, which I think is super interesting. And it's definitely the case with me. And I think that I typically take that as like a hit. Like I think that I am embarrassed about that. And I'm trying to not be. I think that, like people rail against like self-inserts, and they rail against people. I'm not going to speak so broadly, but I also don't want to like lobby complaints at like people, quote unquote, and like pretend that that's valid. But I've heard a critique of, like even actors like fucking like complain about like Ryan Reynolds playing the same guy in every movie, or like Michael Cera playing the same guy in every movie. And I like understand that criticism on like a surface level, but it doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like a decent, like a real genuine criticism, because I don't think that an actor is necessarily measured by their versatility, which I know sounds counterintuitive, but I think that having like a specific thing that you do and you do really well, and it's like limited in scope, but like its application is relatively, like whatever, I think that that's okay. I think it's fine. Frankly, if I can be like as ad hominem as possible, I think that when I hear that complaint, it just sounds like you don't like the guy. Like, you just think that they're obnoxious, and like that's totally valid. Like that's fine. I just think that you should lead with that and not like pretend that you're like, every actor must like go through a gauntlet and like present 3 different roles that are completely different from like anything that they had done previously, and only then will I like whatever. I'm still talking about character design. I think I have been like so caught up in trying to like present other people's perspectives or experiences, and I am super afraid or paranoid of doing it poorly or not doing it justice. And whoa, crazy weather, whoa, summer storm. Good rain. It can like freeze you up a little bit, or it can freeze me up. And I think that like it's okay to just kind of like do what you know and to write what you know. I'm trying to like tell myself that it is. I also should say that I think that in this instance I'm talking about animation as like, I think that to animate is to write. It's the same thing in a different medium. But you can have a self-insert just in a character design and in character animation as much as you can in like a fan fiction. Yeah, and I think that like, why bother being embarrassed? Why would I be embarrassed? I've got conviction for days. I'm to be embarrassed implies that I don't believe in the things that I think or say, or I think that they're like not something that I would stand by. Like, I think that this character design is good. I think that he looks fun and approachable, and I think that he, you know, I think he looks nice. I think he looks good. And then also, like, on the flip side, I'm like talking to my friend and having them inform the other characters' like mannerisms and behavior, and I think that that's fun too. I think that it's cool to like be communicating openly with like collaborators about like, oh, like this is more or less like a cartoon version of me. I'm gonna like amplify these aspects of myself, and here's a cartoon version of you. What do you think would like be a component of their character? I haven't really been like talking. I'm trying to be better about not sharing everything that I think of and come across creatively with everyone in my life, because I've heard that it's not good. Like, I've heard that like while it's fun and it's rewarding and it's exciting, it can also make it so that you lose the desire to then actually complete the thing, because you've already gotten the satisfaction of telling people about it, which is a scary concept, and also probably true. So I'm like, I want to work on more with these characters, and I want to like write more about like my perspective, and frankly, like, I think some of the like most interesting things about me and my experience thus far as a person are also like the ugliest parts of my person, which has been like an issue for me in the past, because I'm like, I don't want to come off like I'm a freak, like I'm a little like freakazoid, and if I write something with a self-insert that would put me in that sort of light, or even just if I write something with a self-insert, I feel like I'm coming off like a little freakazoid. But here's the catch. My goal was, it never should have been to come off like a good guy. And my goal in like making animation was never to be like the cool person that does animation. It was always just to be good at animation. Like, wouldn't you rather listen to a story from someone who is like kind of a weirdo? Like, why would you want stories just from people that were like completely straight-laced and had very normal thoughts in their head and didn't want to or have the intention to share like maybe some of their more intrusive, ugly thoughts? I guess I was like, you know, I'm making like a short in college. Like, you don't want to present something that would reflect poorly on you, and I got concerned with the idea of coming off like I was a good person through my art, which is like such a terrible concept. You shouldn't be worried about making yourself out to be a good guy in addition to trying to make something that is like true to yourself, because then you're just like presenting like a very narrow and also probably like in part fabricated version of yourself. I don't even think like, I can't even imagine that this is going to be a particularly helpful video. I think that I began this sort of thing being like, oh, like maybe people will gain something from the like the speed art thing, and they'll like learn my process, or maybe I'll get to like reflect on my process. But like, man, most of this shit is moving so fast that I would be amazed if you gleaned anything. I spent like so many hours on this, and I think that like most of this footage is sped up like 4,000% or something, like something around there. I sped up the line art like absurdly fast, because the line art took a very, very long time, and then the coloring portion is slowed down a fair bit, because I thought it would be kind of like, it's like the dessert, you know, for me and for you, hopefully. Coloring is just so like relaxing and satisfying. I did want to like, I gave the line art portion a lot of care and like intentionality, because a lot of what I learned on my previous job as a character designer was just like the importance of line placement and line trajectory in like determining and also conveying a character's shapes and volume. This is so nebulous. I don't know that I can explain this thoroughly with just like my hands and a webcam. Basically, just if a shape is incomplete, make sure that there is an implied complete shape based off of where the lines are interrupted, if that makes any sense. Maybe I can like draw a diagram or something. That seems like so much convoluted extra work. I hate that. I'm so lazy. Okay, I think I said everything that I intended to say about these characters. I kind of thought that I had more to say, but I guess I did finish, or I filled like at least 30 minutes, hopefully. If not, then I'll just like cut the video down a bit. Yeah, you know, want to do this more regularly, but have to like be like more conscious of how long my projects are and how long they're taking. Whoever, I don't know, man. I think that I'm gonna enjoy watching these when I'm like 60 or something. And I know that like my friends will like watch these and have a good laugh. If you aren't either me at the age of 60 or one of my friends, what's up? Complete stranger? That's fucking weird. What are you doing here, you little freak? Oh, you just wandered into this room? Gross.